So music is really my reference point for pretty much everything, and if I think back to the 90s, this soundtrack pretty much writes itself. As far as I'm concerned, if these 10 albums don't define the 90s for you, you weren't there. Or you were listening to the wrong kind of music. In 1991, Nirvana releases Nevermind. I think every generation has a "we can make music too" moment, and this was ours. Kurt Cobain screaming "here we are now, entertain us" was such a blatant musical statement that it was suddenly clear that we were going to have something to say. The album itself was just iconic in every single way, from the No Weak song lineup to the Here Come the Loud Distance Wars production to the legendary album cover. Kurt Cobain wanted to marry Beatlesque melodies with Black Sabbath hard rock. The result was such a success on every level, such an obvious peak that would never be surpassed, that I have no doubt it played a part in Cobain's suicide. When, with album number 4 on this list, on repeat in the background, he shotgunned himself. On a personal note, Kurt was a huge fan of R.E.M, and in an attempt to find him some support, Courtney Love turned to Michael Stipe, and plans were in the way for a collaborative musical project. I doubt there is any music I regret not hearing more. Kurt Cobain killed himself during the recording of R.E.M's Monster, and the band memorialized him with one of their most touching efforts, Let Me In. 1991 also saw the release of the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magik. They had been around for a while, but in 1989, Anthony Kiedis and Flea's band was in a tough spot after original guitarist Hillel Slovak dies of an overdose, and drummer Jack Irons decided he cannot continue. Kiedis and Flea nearly made the mistake of their lives when they encouraged local fan and 17-year-old guitar phenom John Frusciante to try out for Frank Zappa, but luckily for them they realized what they had in front of them in time, which was really all John had wanted in the first place, and possibly the worst thing that ever happened to him, but that's a different story. Along with the addition of drummer Chad Smith, the lineup was complete. Their music up to that point was kind of a party rock and roll, and while they had gained a substantial following in LA, it was nothing that was going to make them superstars. In 1989 they released Mother's Milk, their last subpar effort, where I believe Frusciante played a fairly muted role. In 1991 they finally decided to get serious about music, and besides stuffing their Johnsons back into their pants, they bring in Rick Rubin to produce and let Frusciante spearhead the songwriting. They move into an LA mansion, all except Smith, and when they re-emerge, they come out with a monumental, melodic, rock, funk, pop, rap fusion that grabbed you by the tonsils and flipped you inside out. Give It Away made a minor stir, and then Under the Bridge made them international superstars instantly. Also in 1991, U2 released Achtung Baby. They had dominated the 80s with their unique sound, but in one of the gutsier moves in rock history, pivoted towards a kind of guitar-driven Europop sound, which developed into an absolute masterful album with a string of absolute masterful hits. But not before the band nearly broke up as a result of this change of direction. Luckily, they managed to reinvent themselves in the most magnificent of ways with a fantastically unique effort. The album's title, Achtung Baby, is German for Attention Baby, and is a reference to the band's desire to change direction and be more experimental. It was recorded in Berlin, Germany during what Bono called the most intense period of their lives, and is supposedly heavily influenced by the city's atmosphere and history. In 1992, R.E.M. released Automatic for the People, probably my favorite album on this list, and a consensus best album of the decade until OK Computer came along. Fine, I'll admit it here and only here, about 10% of my dismissal of OK Computer is because of its undue comparison to Automatic for the People, and only 90% is because it sucks. Also, calm down, there might still be a Radiohead album on this list. R.E.M. had taken its sweet time climbing up to global superstar status, and what they returned with after 1991's chart-busting Out of Time was one of the most heartfelt and well-produced albums ever. Despite a handful of far more radio-friendly tracks on the album, the band chose to go with the absolute stunning Drive, which shocked the world into absolute speechlessness from the opening sounds. The rest of the album, recorded in various locations around the US, holds up through the end. R.E.M. being R.E.M., instead of doubling down on the genre, which to them had been a mere way station but to most of the world now represented who they are, decided to shake off that forlorn acoustic image. But it was too late. Although they continued to release strong albums through the end, except that one not strong one, Automatic for the People represented their peak popularity. 𝐦𝐨 burst onto the scene in 1993 with their debut album, and from that flanging "It's Coming to Get You" guitar intro of Animal Nitrate to those ghastly, bizarre lyrics and Brett Anderson's high-pitched wail, to the in-your-face, androgynous album cover with apparently no name, it was clear 𝐦𝐨 was something different altogether. True children of the 90s. Sadly, it was the one true collaborative effort between genius guitarist Bernard Butler and the band, as the relationship soured before the band had completed its second album, which had to be finalized without the talented but evidently moody guitarist. When 𝐦𝐨 did return with a new guitarist, it was one that was chosen specifically because of the similarity of his sound to that of Butler. It was a suitable replacement, but it was just that, a replacement. 1993 also saw the release of the Pet Shop Boys' Very. Yes, I admit it, I like the Pet Shop Boys. Okay, more than that, I admire them as songwriters, which is by far the biggest compliment I can pay anyone. The moment the sounds of Can You Forgive Her blasted out of radio speakers, it was clear the boys did not intend to stay in the 80s. If one band epitomizes the anyone can make it vibe of the 90s, it's Weezer, who surprised the world with a debut album out of nowhere in 1994, commonly referred to as the Blue Album, while trying hard not to look like rock stars. Rivers Cuomo might be the best natural songwriter on this list, banging out catchy melody after catchy melody all these years, presented on Weezer's unique surfer rock vibes and Rivers' expert riff work. The end of Only in Dreams may be my favorite 3 minutes of guitar ever. Green Day released Dookie in 1994 with Billy Joe's world-going crazy voice and the frantic lyrics and the tight drum-bass guitar trio sound that they had perfected. Dookie announced to the world the arrival of new punk, which is basically punk played by actual musicians. Like many albums on this list, it represents the utmost peak for this band, who mostly stayed in their comfort zone for the remainder of their career. Dookie was the third album for Green Day, but the first for a major label, and basically ended up labeling them as sellouts and got them banned from the LA punk scene, but I guess they made the right decision there. In the supposed battle between Oasis and Blur, which gave us Britpop, the latter put that conversation to rest with one of the more unique albums of the decade, fluctuating between playfulness to wittiness to the absolute perfection that is To the End. It was one of the 10 classic album covers from the British Arts, commemorated on a UK postage stamp issued by the Royal Mail in 2010. The album was Blur's third album and supposedly followed a Damon Albarn quote from 1990 before the band had even recorded their first album. When our third album comes out, our place as the quintessential English band of the 90s will be assured. This is a simple statement of fact. I intend to write it in 1994. Check. If you want to hear the sounds of a band coming of age, this album may be it. The development in songwriting between the nervous rock of Pablo Honey to the strong, confident writing of The Bends, released in 1995, is just stunning. It's really hard to find the roots of these songs in their previous albums. Sadly, aside from Karma Police, this would be the last music Radiohead would ever create. The process of recording an album was evidently not a joyful one at all for the band, who were under intense pressure to create a follow-up to Creep. In that regard, they fell much short. I'm sure you have a different take, and I do want to hear it. Drop it in the comments.